Hello, my name is Peter, or sometimes Peebs. I guess that's kind of what I've been putting as my online persona name. And I'm making this little video mini podcast, if you will, to discuss the question I have of are pro sports homophobic? Now, where I got this question from did not really come from sports initially. One of my favorite bands, Suit Up Soldier, which, by the way, this is not a promotion for them, but is releasing an album very soon. And when I saw their announcement of this, it reminded me of a video they had made a few months ago by the lead singer where he came out as gay. And me being reminded of this was on the heels of Bisexual Visibility Day. This led me to considering other areas where gay and bisexual men in particular don't really see much representation. And I also had hockey on the mind, so I kind of began to consider professional sports. It's perhaps the strongest culture of traditional American masculinity, which by no coincidence has little to no visible bisexual or gay players within it. So I asked myself, are pro sports homophobic? And in turn, I asked myself, is it worth for players to come out of the closet during their careers? There's a caveat here. I'm going to be lumping together bisexual and gay men, even though I recognize the stigmas they face from themselves and from society can be pretty different. There's a video I want to make someday about specifically the stigmas bisexual men face that I don't really think are talked about. But for the purposes of this video, yes, I'm going to be lumping them together. Also, for the purposes of this video, I will really only be talking about male players. I don't really have as much experience, obviously, being a dude in female bisexuality or being a lesbian, and I'm well aware that women's sports has their own history of LGBT acceptance. Frankly, I'm less adept in talking about it anyways, and I think there's a significant difference in progress compared to the far more popular male-dominated pro sports to women's sports, which good for them, frankly. So I asked myself, what are the reasons why there aren't any out players in the four major American sports leagues: baseball, basketball, football, and my personal favorite, hockey? And before I got to the answer for those questions, I want to talk about those internal and external factors that I hope glean some insight into understanding why there are not many, or any really, out players. Internally and externally, there's a lot of connection between these factors. Starting with the internal factors, there's a very real and legitimate argument as to why there is good reason to not come out of the closet as a professional athlete. You're in a team. Any press away from the game, the sport, the competition, your performance is a break in the chain. You need to be a cohesive, monolithic unit. And a lot of people will say that it disrupts the cohesion of this unit to express sexual orientation and gain all this press for something that isn't talking about their performance, their games, their victories. Even Jason Collins, who was the second athlete to ever play openly for a North American sports league, right after the first, Robbie Rogers, for the LA Galaxy, a soccer team, had said back in 2013, post coming out, "I wish I wasn't the kid in the classroom raising his hand and saying, 'I'm different.'" So I found two studies done specifically for hockey that came with slightly conflicting results. One studied the usage of traditionally homophobic language within hockey teams. While 60% of the respondents claimed that they had recently used slurs and this traditional homophobic language within the previous 2 weeks of being interviewed, an overwhelming 86% of those respondents welcomed gay athletes, meaning a majority of hockey players, according to this study, found little connection between actual acceptance of gay athletes and the language that they used. An unpopular opinion I'm gonna express, I actually kind of get it. I guess I just kind of understand that because I play insult all the time. However, one has to ask themselves, does it come at the expense of my morals? So another survey was conducted with 6 straight former NHL players and 6 openly gay hockey players who played for elite teams, but not necessarily, professional NHL teams. And it came with some alternative results within the internal affairs of teams compared to the first study's results. Between the players surveyed, answers varied on if the NHL was by and large homophobic. But the general consensus mirrors that initial idea I had of being different being bad. Sports sociologist and head of this study, Cheryl McDonald, who has done a lot in terms of research regarding sexual orientation and pro athletes, stated that the players, straight or gay, overall believed that, quote, "It doesn't matter if you're gay or concussed, or you've been sexually abused or have mental issues. None of those are okay because you are a distraction," end quote. The players also overall seem to agree that one of the most major reasons preventing players from coming out during their time on the ice was that the fear of losing their career outweighed the mental burden being in the closet put on them, meaning their athletic life and personal life not only had to be separated but pit against each other, having one or the other. You couldn't have both. Ryan O'Callaghan, a NFL player albeit, came out of the closet after his career was over. He was convinced that no one would accept him as a gay football player ever, and that he would have ended his own life once his career on the field had come to a close. But for those who were out and on the ice, those players surveyed here, there's an interesting and overall positive story that developed. The first study I mentioned said that overall, players believed that hockey teams were welcoming of gay athletes, but the second study here conflicts with that, saying that being gay was putting unnecessary burdens onto not only yourself, but your team. Similarly, while players in the first study believed there to be little to no connection between traditionally homophobic language and their actual acceptance of gay players, this second study did find a loose connection. When athletes played openly gay, they reported a significant decrease of this language from fellow teammates. Though it appears it's not because players necessarily realized that their gay teammates could be disconcerted by that language on their own, rather the gay players had to intervene and respectfully ask for the language use to decline, and subsequently it did. And sure, when these hockey players did come out, there was initial disruption within the locker rooms and within the teams. That cohesiveness was damaged. However, these out gay hockey players also reported that it did not take long for their team to frankly get over it. The quote, "no subject is off limits" attitude of hockey locker rooms quickly returned, and these players reported positively that fellow teammates would respectfully tease them and genuinely ask things about their sexual orientation and their personal lives regarding their sex. In other words, to summarize, there is space to be razzed on a bit for being gay within the locker room. The internal fears and factors homosexual players have may not be as decisive as they think it to be. Maybe athletes do not foster as severe of a homophobic environment as we may expect. However, this was all just talking about the internal affairs of pro sports. The teams and the players are the internal factors. Externally, their public image, I wanted to know how that factors into this. I bring up hockey once again for the sake of this video, not only because it's really the only sport out of these four that I honestly care about, but also because I don't think anyone would disagree that hockey especially has a stereotype of a homophobic culture surrounding it. In fact, I did a little digging. I went to 4 NHL teams' Instagram pages: the New York Islanders, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Nashville Predators, and my personal favorite, the San Jose Sharks, which I'm well aware have been terrible for the last few years. Please don't remind me. June 26th was NHL Pride Day, and on or around that day, each of these 4 teams posted something celebrating Pride. So, like any self-hating gay, I decided to look at the comments of them and found some pretty disheartening results. Out of the 4, I was surprised that the New York Islanders had the most amount of negative feedback. However, all 4 of them had significant blowback. In fact, I'm certain the Predators deleted most of their negative comments because I was surprised to find the least within theirs. These comments ranged from blatant homophobia, such as, "Play hockey, don't support mental challenges. Get rid of this garbage," with a lovely mosaic made out of emojis burning a pride flag, to more passive homophobia, usually revolving around something like, "just play sports," which I say is passively homophobic because I'd see their point if they were consistent. But here's a post from the Penguins showing the team in some very dapper suits. There wasn't one comment asking for the team to just keep it to hockey regarding their Instagram posts. These commenters are specifically mad that the teams are endorsing Pride. There's no buts about it. They don't understand why it's important to endorse Pride, despite serving as a major reason why it's important. They say, "Be who you are," only when I don't have to see it. Frankly, this opens up a whole other conversation I don't think I'm very well equipped to have, and that conversation is the dehumanization we have of professional athletes. They are people, not just toys for us to watch compete against each other. They have lives that affect them, and in turn their performance. However, getting back on track, another just blind statement I've seen from fans is that the world's changed. No one cares about this sort of thing. If it had changed that much, I think we'd be seeing players out of the closet now. In August 2019, just a year ago, Ryan O'Callaghan, that player from before who had retired and then come out of the closet for the NFL, said that there's at least one gay or bisexual professional football player on each team. So if the world's changed enough, what's keeping them in the closet? It's something, or maybe these somethings, these external and internal factors that affects them. So frankly, I am not under the impression that there has been much change. 6 years ago, Michael Sam was drafted to the Rams and would have been the first openly gay player to participate in the NFL. Fans and commentators, external factors, were then suddenly skeptical of the safety of the other players having a gay man share the locker room with them. But remember that study I brought up earlier, it alludes that internally, sexuality isn't as much of a problem as we'd like to think. However, of course, the sample size was unfortunately extremely limited due to the fact that there aren't many outwardly gay players in professional sports, and the study pertained to a different sport altogether, hockey, not football. But I think the fact remains that it isn't as big of a deal as we'd like to think. Like Ryan O'Callaghan claimed, these players are gay or bisexual regardless of who knows. And these honestly ignorant ideas were spread just around 6 years ago. I think it'd be naive to claim that these sentiments have just completely disappeared. Michael Sam lost his draft pick that year, and I don't think it was completely as a result of his open homosexuality, but I think it would be ignorant to say it didn't have a part in his rejection. Last year, also right around the time when Ryan O'Callaghan made that claim about gay and bisexual players in the NFL, Ryan Russell came out as bisexual. Ryan Russell was previously signed to the Buffalo Bills, but what's important is he's still playing as a free agent for the NFL. Meaning, if he were to be signed right now, Ryan Russell would be the only out player currently within the NFL. And not only just the NFL, that also includes the NHL, the NBA, and the MLB. He came out, though, because he had fears of being outed by someone else. In Ryan Russell's public essay, Coming Out of the Closet, which frankly I think we should all read, he revealed that a blogger figured out he was in a homosexual relationship, and he basically pleaded to the blogger not to reveal this information to the public. Let me just read what Ryan Russell wrote happened afterwards. After hearing me out, know what that blogger told me? That he would grant me this favor, but that I should be more careful. Let that sink into your brain. Even though openly LGBTQ people are thriving in every area of public life, politics, entertainment, the top corporations in America, they are so invisible in pro sports that a gossip blogger is doing a favor for a bisexual football player by not disclosing that he happens to date men. Nobody should need a favor to live honestly. In nobody's worlds should being careful mean not being yourself. The career you choose shouldn't dictate the parts of yourself that you embrace. So, if things have changed so much, why is it just a year ago sexuality still seemed to be a point of contention and blackmail for professional athletes? To put it bluntly, pro sports has not progressed, as these people like to claim. So with all this information, I think I at least found the answer to my question, is it worth players coming out during their career? And in turn, I think I'm answering that question I saw a lot in those Instagram comments of, do they really need to be so public about it? The answer is yes. That quote I used at the beginning of this video from Jason Collins, I purposefully left incomplete. The full quote was, "I wish I wasn't a kid in the classroom, raising his hand and saying, 'I'm different.' If I had my way, someone else would have already done this. Nobody has, which is why I'm raising my hand." Regarding the internal factors, I don't think I need to pull out studies and scientific research to make the claim mental health affects athletic performance. Players not feeling like they need to hide something from their fellow teammates and in turn being accepted for their sexuality would obviously improve mental health of these players. Ryan O'Callaghan suffered thoughts of ending his own life, and the year after Michael Sam had his draft loss, he retired from football for mental health reasons as well. A team is only as good as its weakest link, and a closeted player harboring all this guilt, shame, and fear is a weaker link than a player accepted and supported by his teammates. So externally, those factors do participate in a far more do or die environment. I reiterate, one of the strongest factors influencing players remaining in the closet is the fear of losing their career altogether. And even in this climate, they very well could. So why come out of the closet to the public? Why not keep it to your teammates, if anything? Get the support from them, and otherwise just stay quiet. No press, no interviews. It's all about the game to the fans. So these external factors reminded me of way back when the gay rights movement of the 70s and 80s. People like Harvey Milk were encouraging everyone to come out, and if they don't come out of the closet, to have someone else purposefully out them. It's a dangerous thing to do to someone, back then especially. I understand the sentiment, however, to show that LGBT people were everywhere and that you owe it to yourself to be honest, and you owe it to your legacy to make life that much easier for the LGBT people that came after them. I don't encourage outing others, but the thought behind it makes sense. I know personally, it would mean so much to me to see someone on the ice slam their face against the glass that gets it, that knows what it's like to be gay. And I know I'm not the only one who thinks this either. Like Ryan Russell said, pro sports remains as one of the only remaining public areas that lacks any real thriving gay or bisexual player within it, or at least one that's open about it. To put it simply, externally, the reason it is beneficial to have out gay and bisexual players is it would make significant strides in the last remaining facets of homophobic cultures, because it normalizes us that much more and removes the shame that many men today still have about their sexuality. I can't answer if pro sports is homophobic. The NHL in particular, despite hockey culture definitely having some issues with LGBT people, has made huge efforts to endorse Pride. They have NHL Pride Day. They have hockey games dedicated to Pride, and several upon several players in hockey and otherwise have endorsed the You Can Play organization, which is an organization specifically dedicated to the normalization and treatment of LGBT people within the field of professional sports. I'd like to think that maybe a small percentage of these athletes throw their support in as quiet ways of showing themselves some self-respect regarding their sexuality. Like, I'm not ready to come out of the closet, but at least I can support others from the sidelines, or something like that. I love the You Can Play organization because that's their mantra. If you can play, you can play. It doesn't matter who you love. But these motions within the NHL and within other professional sports organizations do not change the fact that many fans just do not support gay people, and that no athletes play out of the closet. I can't close this on a happy ending, honestly. In fact, I still think by the time I'm 30, there still won't be any significant change in pro sports. Maybe 4 or 5 players in these sports will play outwardly, but it won't be normalized, and honestly, it breaks my heart. But it doesn't stop me from hoping. Hold on there, me from the past. Me from the future who had finished editing and exporting this video has some things to add. Now, I'm going a little off script. I haven't written this out, so I apologize if my words aren't amazing, and I'm recording this in my bathroom, so what ambiance. But a friend of mine gave me some criticism with the video before I had uploaded it. He was a little upset I did not really talk about the MLS, Major League Soccer. And I don't really consider the MLS as a part of the same culture as hockey, baseball, basketball, and football, at least the same American sort of culture. And I don't think many people would disagree with me on this, save for them trying to find some sort of argument against the facts I had presented. And it's true, if you are looking for an openly homosexual player playing for a Division I sports team at the same time of them being out of the closet and not just being a free agent either, soccer is where you'd want to look. Like I mentioned, Robbie Rogers was one of the first and one of the few, period, to ever be signed for a team, play for the team, and be open about his sexuality all at the same time. And I feel it is important for me to bring this up because one of the only other players to ever do this was also in the MLS, and that player was Colin Martin for, at the time, Minnesota United. Now, Colin Martin is not a part of the MLS, he is a part of Division II soccer, which is the USL, and why this is important is because last night, again, while me and my friend were having this argument/discussion, the San Diego Loyal, the team he plays for, walked off when the opposing team, the Phoenix Rising, threw a homophobic slur at Colin Martin. Now, they didn't just do this because they were losing and looking for an excuse to walk off the field. No, they had a 3-1 lead, so this was all done by intention and in solidarity with Colin Martin. And this is game-changing, no pun intended, because there has never been such an act of solidarity with a homosexual athlete this high up the hierarchy of professional sports ever. I can't recall anything like this even remotely happening, and it kind of changed my outlook on what I had said at the end of the original version of this video altogether. Maybe there is a shift for the better with acceptance of professional athletes who are open about their sexuality, because they had no need to do this. Apparently, one of their previous games, one of their players had a racial slur thrown at them, and their idea was they didn't want something like that happening again unchecked. So they walked off. And this game, should they have finished it and clearly have won it, they would have gotten to the playoffs probably. I don't think this was a necessary decision for them, but I don't think it was a bad decision either. Like I said, this is unprecedented, and it's kind of hope-inspiring. I don't think this story, or adding the MLS's own story with acceptance of homosexual players, really changes my inability to answer the question if pro sports is homophobic or not. Another argument my friend had made when I showed him the video was maybe there's just not that many gay people who are into sports. But again, I want to bring up that quote by Ryan O'Callaghan. He said, at least for the NFL, there's at least one gay or bisexual person on each of the teams. So my argument is maybe not that there aren't many people who are into sports, rather they just are too afraid to be open about their sexuality within the realm of professional sports. There's also a whole other point I didn't make about the fact that maybe there aren't many gay people in professional sports, also because of the fact that they get dissuaded from sports at younger ages. I mean, kids are kids, and while a lot of progress has been made with our generation, the previous generations weren't raised with the same environment. So people who were 15, 16, 17 years and years and years ago were not getting very accepted for their sexuality and probably just walked away from the sport. I will say that this story with the San Diego Loyal really has given me a little bit of hope, and that if Division II can have something so extreme happen in support of LGBT solidarity, who's to say in the next few years, maybe a few players will come out of the closet during their career as a professional athlete within one of these 4 major leagues. I'm feeling a little more hopeful.